I promised a response tonight to what we've been discussing throughout the show. The left killing free speech and silencing contrary voices via intimidation and sometimes slander. Our founders warned about the dangers of limiting speech. Ben Franklin wrote, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." And yet, here we are. As we've seen throughout the show, from Diamond and Silk to Professor McAdams, when individuals say things that are uncomfortable for the secular left, they aren't challenged or debated. They're branded, demonized, and sometimes evicted altogether from the public square. That is not the American way. We're winning the war of ideas on immigration, the economy, life, trade, and yes, political correctness. Which is why we're seeing the left-wing retaliatory hit squads popping up everywhere. Today in academia, in Hollywood, and in the media, the left will brook no dissent, and they will militantly police the borders of their stale orthodoxy. Well, we're not going to stand for this. So tonight, I'm announcing a new recurring series on the Ingram Angle. It's called Defending the First, where we will expose the enemies of the First Amendment, of free expression and free thought, while showcasing those brave voices making a difference. So if you've been subjected to threats or intimidation because of your speech, I want to know about it. Tweet me at Ingram Angle, because without free speech and a free conscience, we're not truly a free people. We're not afraid to debate ideas here. We relish a vigorous debate. They run from it. Good luck with that. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night crew is up next. Till tomorrow. Good night from Washington. It's good to be back.
Welcome back, Laura. Great to have you back with us in D.C.
Thank you.
Great show. All right. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, and we start with a Fox News alert. President Trump promising to make a major decision tonight or very shortly thereafter on Syria after another suspected poison gas attack. We are following the latest developments tonight on Syria as the president huddles with his top military advisors, along with former Ambassador John Bolton, his very first day as the new national security advisor. At the same time, Mr. Trump is calling an FBI raid on his personal attorney a, quote, attack on our country, pushing back hard against what he calls a disgraceful witch hunt. Has the special counsel probe crossed into new territory when it comes to presidential scrutiny? You'll remember its stated goal, investigating suspected Russian interference in the 2016 election. We've got team coverage for you tonight. Kristen Fisher standing by with the presidential planning on Syria. President Trump says there is going to be a big price to pay for that chemical attack. But we begin with Garrett Tenney breaking down the special counsel action and the president's very heated response. Garrett.
Well, Shannon, this is significant because Michael Cohen isn't just the president's personal attorney. He's a longtime friend and confidant who has played an integral part in the Trump family's businesses. Today, we learned he is also the subject of a criminal investigation by the FBI. This morning, agents in New York City raided Cohen's apartment, his office in Rockefeller Center, and his hotel room at the Loews Regency on Park Avenue, where he's been staying. The New York Times reports agents seized emails, tax documents, business records, and information about Cohen's clients, which are related to a number of issues, including Cohen's hush payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Federal prosecutors told Michael Cohen's attorney, Stephen Ryan, the raids were related to an investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller, which was then referred to federal prosecutors in New York. But Cohen's attorneys say a lot of what the FBI took is protected under attorney-client privilege, including Cohen's private communications with Donald Trump. That is significant because the FBI has special procedures to raid the offices of an attorney, and there's a very high bar to get a search warrant approved to do that. But the fact that this comes as a result of the special counsel's investigation is also creating a lot of frustration around the president. And while President Trump and his attorneys have repeatedly dismissed the idea that he will fire special counsel Robert Mueller, tonight he berated the investigation and seemed to at least leave the door open to that possibility.
It's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. I said that is really now in a whole new level of unfairness. This is the most biased group of people. These people have the biggest conflicts of interest, so they find no collusion, and then they go from there and they say, well, let's keep going. and they raid an office of a personal attorney early in the morning.
Did you have an affair with Stormy Daniels?
Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens, but I think it's really a sad situation.
Tonight, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pushed back on those statements with a warning, saying if the president is thinking of using this raid to fire Special Counsel Mueller or otherwise interfere with the chain of command in the Russia probe, we Democrats have one simple message for him: don't. At this point, we don't know what exact crime Cohen is being investigated for, but in order for these search warrants to be issued, a federal judge would have had to determine that there was enough probable cause a crime was committed and that these searches would provide evidence of it. Tonight, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal called this a game changer in the Russia investigation.
It's probably one of the most significant, most seismic events in the Trump-Russia investigation. This is now an investigation that has a life of its own. It raises the stakes for the president.
And a number of legal experts, including Alan Dershowitz tonight on Fox News, said they believe this is an effort by Robert Mueller to try and get Michael Cohen to turn on President Trump, though we should note Michael Cohen has mentioned repeatedly he would take a bullet for the president. Shannon?
Yes, he has. All right, Garrett Tenney, thank you very much. President Trump has said he wants U.S. troops to withdraw from Syria soon, but he's now faced with how to respond to a vicious chemical weapons attack that has left dozens of Syrian civilians dead and hundreds more injured. Kristen Fisher is tracking all the new details, and what we're being told is keeping all options on the table at the White House. Kristen.
That's right, Shannon. President Trump spent tonight meeting with U.S. military leaders at the White House, where he said point blank that the U.S. will respond forcefully to this chemical weapons attack. Now, that is a world away from what the president said just late last month. 2 weeks ago, President Trump did something he's repeatedly said he wouldn't do. He telegraphed his military strategy.
By the way, we're knocking the hell out of ISIS. We'll be coming out of Syria like very soon. Let the other people take care of it now.
And he did it again just a few days later at the White House.
I want to get out. I want to bring our troops back home.
4 days after making those remarks, one of the worst chemical weapons attacks in Syrian history. The next day, Republican Senator John McCain said President Trump was partly to blame because he, quote, signaled to the world that the United States would prematurely withdraw from Syria. Bashar Assad and his Russian and Iranian backers have heard him and were emboldened by American inaction. But the same day, President Trump did something else he's rarely, if ever, done before. He publicly criticized his Russian counterpart by saying, quote, President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing Animal Assad. Now Republicans like Senator Lindsey Graham are urging him to not let Syrian President Bashar al-Assad cross another U.S. president's red line and emerge unscathed.
Mr. President, you need to follow through with that tweet, show a resolve that Obama never did to get this right.
Today, President Trump said all options are on the table and that he expects to make a major decision within the next 2 days. At the same time, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, was at an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, imploring them to make a move.
History will record this as the moment when the Security Council either discharged its duty or demonstrated its utter and complete failure to protect the people of Syria. Either way, the United States will respond.
And tonight, the president echoed those remarks while flanked by his military leaders.
It will be met, and it will be met forcefully. And when, I will not say, because I don't like talking about timing, but we are developing the greatest force that we've ever had.
So it appears as if some kind of military response is imminent. What and when, we don't know. It's also worth pointing out that today was the new National Security Advisor John Bolton's first official day on the job, and what a first day it was. Shannon, he is right at the center of all of this.
Absolutely, and very much expected to be an influential voice there. Kristen Fisher, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The president met with his national security team tonight on Syria, and with his new national security advisor, John Bolton, at his side, ended up talking extensively with the press about not only Syria, but also the special counsel raids on his personal attorney. Joining us now, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, as well as the Senate Armed Forces Committee. Good to see you tonight, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's start with the raids on Michael Cohen. I want to read something from Vanity Fair. Emily Jane Fox wrote this. She said, while Trump's allies have dismissed many of the people in the special counsel's crosshairs as low-level campaign officials or waved away the charges against Paul Manafort as unrelated to Trump, Cohen is inextricably and emotionally linked to the Trump family. Last summer, he told me he would, quote, take a bullet for the president. How is what happened today different than what we saw?
I don't know what they're looking at. The only thing that I can tell the president and his supporters and the country as a whole, if President Trump's campaign colluded or worked with the Russians in an improper way, they're in big-time trouble. If that didn't happen, most of this won't matter. Stormy Daniels is not going to matter. I don't know what the NDA was all about. Michael Cohen may have done something he shouldn't have done in terms of that legal transaction. But the one thing President Trump needs to be assured of, if he didn't work with the Russians, the American people will see through all this. If he did work with the Russians, he's in trouble, and I've seen no evidence that he did.
And he's maintained all along that he wants this to wrap up. He said he wants to talk to Mueller because he says he's confident that they won't find anything. I mean, listen, his attorneys are going to fight with him about that. That apparently has been a big point of contention.
But here's the point. If the Trump campaign in some way received help from the Russian government, Russian intelligence services, WikiLeaks, coordinated with them, that's a big deal, and they'll pay a heavy price. All of this other stuff is just background noise. The obstruction case, if Trump didn't collude with the Russians, why he fired Comey really doesn't matter, because he could fire Comey for the way he looks. So the only thing I've ever really been concerned about is whether or not the campaign coordinated their efforts with the Russian intelligence services or some ally of Russia, and I've seen no evidence of that yet. This Michael Cohen thing, if it's not related to Russia, if I were Trump, I wouldn't worry about it.
All right, I want to play a little bit of what Molly Hemingway had to say on Special Report tonight, talking about Mueller and the fact that he seems to be feeling pretty confident these days. Here's what she said.
Mueller is unafraid. And it's worth remembering that he was also unafraid when he botched the anthrax investigation by targeting the wrong person, a blunder that cost taxpayers quite a bit of money. I think at this point there is definitely a burden of proof that the FBI, Department of Justice, and special counsel have to meet. President Trump talked about some of the conflicts of interest that are there, and Rosenstein actually has quite a few of them.
He actually talked about him tonight when he was asked whether or not, why haven't you fired Mueller? And he did talk about that. He didn't give an answer there, but then he went on to talk about Rosenstein. And so clearly these two men are on his mind.
So I remember the Ken Starr investigation. The Democrats went after Ken Starr, that it was a Republican hack, that everybody that worked for Ken Starr was a Republican. You shouldn't believe a word they said. So this is not unusual to make the special counsel a political punching bag. The only thing I could tell the president, Mr. Mueller has a good reputation. He's doing his job professionally as far as I can tell, and the only way you can dismiss him is for cause. And again, if you didn't collude with the Russians, you got nothing to worry about. The only way you could get in trouble is to take the law in your own hands, and Richard Nixon tried that and didn't work out well.
No, it did not. Okay, I want to ask you quickly about Syria. In the wake of the chemical attack last week, the president has publicly called out Putin, Russia, Iran for their involvement. Tonight, your colleague, Senator Mike Lee, had this to say. He says, if we do put together a response for them. He says if the response is going to include military force, the President of the United States should come to Congress and ask for authorization before military force is used. What's your take?
I think Mike Lee's been wrong about almost everything related to this war, and I like him a lot. The Congress declares war. The President can't do that. We've only had 5 declarations of war in the history of the country. The President, as Commander-in-Chief, has all the authority he needs under Article 2 to go after enemies of this nation. How many people does a guy have to kill by chlorine gas until the world gets upset? The president can't rely on the United Nations. It's a feckless body when it comes to rogue regimes.
Vote tomorrow.
Yeah, but what will they vote? Nothing will happen. The only thing that can happen is for President Trump to lead a coalition of the willing, the Arabs and Europeans, to go in and destroy every air base that Assad owns. If I were president, there would be no runway available to the Syrian Air Force. There'd be no planes available, and I'd make Assad a target because he's a war criminal. So this president, Donald Trump, has brought North Korea to the table because he's been tough. This president's got the Iranians worried because he's tough. Here's what he has to accomplish. Kim Jong-un has to look at what he does in Syria and say to himself, I don't want to cross Donald Trump. Look at what happened to Assad. If it's one and done, if it's not part of a comprehensive strategy against Assad, then you're going to embolden every bad actor on the planet, including North Korea and the Iranians. This is a defining moment for the president. Take this guy on, blow his Air Force to smithereens, and go after him. The next thing you know, the world will be a better place.
Well, we'll see what they're deciding behind closed doors tonight as they have those very high-level conversations. Senator, thanks for dropping in.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Well, no government is publicly claiming responsibility for the airstrikes on Syria, but Moscow is pointing the finger squarely at Israel for the early Monday morning bombing of a Syrian airbase near Homs, which killed at least 14 people, including Iranian soldiers. Officially, Israel is not involved in the war in Syria, but since 2011, Israeli policy has been to prevent any transfer of advanced weapons to militant groups like Iran-backed Hezbollah. Well, back here in Washington, the federal budget deficit is set to grow substantially over the next few years. That's according to new projections released tonight. The Congressional Budget Office says the combined effect of the tax cut bill and the latest spending plan will push the deficit to $804 billion this year. It predicts $1 trillion deficit by 2020. House Budget Committee Chairman Steve Womack, a Republican, says it is particularly sobering that mandatory spending continues to grow at such an unsustainable pace, making it even more difficult to achieve balance. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says this: the CBO's latest report exposes the scam behind the rosy rhetoric from Republicans that their tax bill would pay for itself. Waiting for the next move, we'll go inside the Pentagon for military options on Syria. And Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg on Capitol Hill, his company and his trademark attire facing scrutiny inside the Beltway.
Is he going to behave like an adult as a major corporate leader, or give me this phony baloney? What is it, hoodies and dungarees, and what is that kind of signal?
Dungarees. And who's telling the truth, James Comey or Loretta Lynch? The two at odds over Lynch's infamous tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton while candidate Hillary Clinton was under investigation. Don't forget that Comey book's coming. We'll help separate fact from fiction when we return. This is a Fox News alert. We're getting word a guided missile destroyer is leaving a port of call as the president prepares to make what he calls a major decision on Syria. As you may recall, when chemical weapons were used on Syrian civilians last year, President Trump authorized multiple missile strikes against a Syrian airfield. So what now? Jennifer Griffin joins us from the Pentagon with more. Jennifer?
Shannon, the Pentagon has been working since the weekend to draw up options for the president, who did not mince his words today, calling the attack barbaric, leaving no doubt that he planned to react to this weekend's attack. The president indicated a major decision on Syria would be coming in the next 24 to 48 hours. He said in his mind there was no doubt who was responsible for this attack, and nothing is off the table.
If it's Russia, if it's Syria, if it's Iran, if it's all of them together, we'll figure it out, and we'll know the answers quite soon. So we're looking at that very, very strongly and very seriously.
The president mentioned Vladimir Putin by name, reinforcing a message delivered by Defense Secretary Jim Mattis at the Pentagon this morning. Mattis spoke before a pre-scheduled meeting with the Emir of Qatar. He shifted the focus to Russia, which has repeatedly blocked UN resolutions punishing Syria.
Is the U.S. capable of striking Assad's chemical weapons facilities?
Now, the first thing we have to look at is why a chemical weapon still being used at all when Russia was the framework guarantor of removing all the chemical weapons. And so working with our allies and partners, from NATO to Qatar and elsewhere, we're going to address this issue.
Can you rule out taking action, launching airstrikes against Assad, Mr. Secretary?
I don't rule out anything.
Right now, the U.S. has no aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean or Persian Gulf, but the Navy announced the USS Donald Cook, a guided missile destroyer with dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles on board, left a port call in Cyprus this morning, putting it within striking range of Syria. The Russians are blaming Israeli jets for bombing a Syrian air base last night, which is used by both the Russians and the Iranians. 3 Iranians were killed in the overnight strike. Officials here at the Pentagon tell me the Israelis gave them a heads up about the strike and suggested more could be in the offing. Shannon?
All right, Jennifer Griffin for us at the Pentagon. Thank you very much. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has made a habit of tough talk on Russia. She's back at it tonight on what the administration believes is Russia's role in Syria.
The Russian regime, whose hands are all covered in the blood of Syrian children, cannot be ashamed by pictures of its victims. We've tried that before. We must not overlook Russia and Iran's roles in enabling the Assad regime's murderous destruction.
So let's talk about it with Rob O'Neill, the Navy SEAL who took out Osama bin Laden, and Michael Waltz, a decorated Green Beret and author of Warrior Diplomat, also running for Congress in Florida. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Shannon. Thank you, Shannon.
All right, I want to play a little bit of what the president has said about who's responsible and where we go next.
We are getting clarity on that. Who was responsible for the weapons attack? We are getting some very good clarity, actually. Okay. We have some pretty good answers.
Thanks, everyone. What are your options? Thank you. Thank you.
We have a lot of options militarily, and we'll be letting you know pretty soon.
Okay? Thanks, everyone. Thank you all.
Probably after the fact.
All right, Rob, how much more do you think we need to know about this? Because if a lot of people are questioning, if the president said, hey, listen, I think we're just about done with this mission in Syria, why would the Assad regime do something like this, which many people believe draws the U.S. right back in?
They did this because they've been doing it pretty much the whole time. This is their M.O. They've gotten away with it a whole bunch of times, even with the famous red line with President Obama. We did strike them once last April. They know they can do it. They're sending a message to the holds out in that region of the resistance fighters. They want to show them they will do this to them and put the fear into them. I give the president credit for taking a tactical pause and making sure it was them, not the rebels themselves, for the propaganda piece. Finding out why they would do it, and they did do it. It has been confirmed it was them doing it, so you will see a swift response. We're trying to get an alliance together to include the French and the UK, hopefully the UN, but I think Ambassador Haley was right when she said, the UN needs to prove that, they're worth anything, but if I were betting on it, I would say they're not.
Okay, Michael, I want to read a little bit of what we've got in a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Take it all with a grain of salt. It says false information is being planted about the alleged use of chlorine and other toxic agents by the Syrian government forces. Goes on later to say, we have to say once again that military interference in Syria, where Russian forces have been deployed at the request of the legitimate government, referring to Assad, under contrived and false pretexts, is absolutely unacceptable, can lead to very grave consequences. Sounds like they're warning us, first of all, denying or questioning reports about who's responsible. There are even some reports they're questioning in Iran as well whether it even happened, and now warning us about getting involved militarily.
Well, two things, Shannon. Number one, we can't, at this point, the United States cannot do nothing. We just can't at this point. By turning a blind eye, as President Obama did the last several years of his administration, we essentially accept the use of WMD by despotic regimes all over the world, number one. Number two, we can tell by the movement of these types of munitions, by the types of aircraft, the types of artillery pieces used for them, who's responsible. And then thirdly, in terms of a Russian warning, so to speak, the number of Russian mercenaries recently tried to move into areas held by U.S. forces and backed by U.S. allies, and we essentially punched them in the nose and smoked them.
Okay.
The Russians wouldn't dare. And we have to respond, and I think we have to respond forcefully. Senator Graham is absolutely right. We need to take down Assad's Air Force, and if President Obama had done it years ago, I think thousands of lives would have been saved.
Okay, and very quickly, because I want to get a quick response from both of you, what are your concerns about if Assad is taken out, what's waiting behind him? Rob, you first.
Well, I mean, there needs to be a swift response right now just because it's been happening and happening, and if we don't do anything now, the world is at a point where it needs to see justice, and if we keep letting this happen, we see it all over the place. The Russians are using chemical weapons in the UK. They're backing them here. And like Michael was saying, they're even lying about putting mercenaries in. They met the U.S., tried to with force. We pretty much decimated them.
And Michael, your concerns about Assad and what comes after?
Well, I don't know that we're necessarily talking regime change with Assad here, but what we're talking about is stopping his ability to use WMD on his own people and having the region descend into chaos again, where you have refugee flows that ISIS infiltrates through Europe and then uses those platforms to then attack the United States. So what we need, the United States needs to stay engaged in the region. We have less than 2,000 special operators there, and I think the downside of completely pulling out is you have ISIS come back again, our allies get slaughtered, and Iran and Russia running amok in the Middle East.
Yeah, and those allies become very wary about working with us again if we leave at the most critical time.
And if we have to go back again, the price will even be higher.
Yeah, Michael Waltz and Rob O'Neill, thank you both for your service and for being with us tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, Facebook and privacy. The CEO of Facebook makes the rounds on Capitol Hill ahead of what could be a very difficult couple of days for him before congressional committees this week. And a liberal judge's passing may give President Trump a chance to reshape one of the most left-leaning courts in the country. Trace is here to explain what the president could do next. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg ditching the T-shirt and hoodie and apologizing for what he calls Facebook mistakes. He's making the rounds on Capitol Hill, far from his Silicon Valley home, and facing bipartisan scrutiny from both the White House and prominent Democrats on Capitol Hill.
I think the message I wanted to convey to him, that if we don't rein in the misuse of social media, none of us are going to have any privacy anymore.
Is he going to behave like an adult as a major corporate leader, or give me this phony baloney? What is it, hoodies and dungarees, and what is that kind of signal cell?
Joining me now, already laughing, Fox News politics editor and author of the Halftime Report, Chris Direwalt. You don't often hear the word dungarees.
No, and that's a term I use, actually. So.
I felt like it was a Chris Direwalt word.
Absolutely. Larry, all I can say is I'm glad that Larry Kudlow's back on TV.
Listen, I love his scarf, and I love his soundbites. Okay, so listen, Zuckerberg was in the whole suit and tie. He's making the rounds today. We have a little bit of what he's going to say tomorrow. Just to share a snippet, he's going to say, it was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here. This is a lot different than what I think of, like Martin Shkreli came up to the Hill. And it was like
pharma bro.
That was a disaster for him.
So Facebook wants to be regulated, and so does Google, Amazon, the bigs. So what we're looking at is a market sector that's moving into maturation. We're moving into the adolescence of this. The big ones don't want the Wild West anymore, because obviously what would happen when a company has failed as thoroughly and as completely as Facebook has, competitive market forces would eventually drag them under, and they would go down and they would be replaced by somebody else. What they're looking for really is they're looking for the gentle protective custody of the federal government. That's why they spend a lot of money on lobbying. That's why they do all this PR. That's why they suck up to these politicians. And in the end, they want to create a regulatory structure that will protect them from competition. Yeah, there'll be new rules to live by, but you know, a few $1 billion profit, everything it takes the sting out.
Another one of our favorite soundbite givers on Capitol Hill, Senator John Kennedy. Here's what he's saying about it.
Well, I come in peace. I'm not interested in regulating Facebook ads.
I come in peace. I'm not going to regulate them to death. But what kind of questions do you think that Zuckerberg's going to get tomorrow? Do you think that this is so different than the world he operates in?
Well, it is, and unfortunately for a lot of these teen titans, they have existed in this bubble. You think the bubble is thick in Washington. Can you imagine the thickness of the bubble for a Silicon Valley billionaire?
In a hoodie.
In a hoodie, who's not accustomed to these issues. But let's remember, whatever Congress does is secondary to the national discussion that we're having now anew as our online lives, our digital lives, and our regular meat space lives merge into one stream. And people were not careful about what they did with Facebook. Facebook's biggest problem, I do believe ultimately they will be successful in getting favorable regulations from the government in time. They just have a big enough market share that I feel like they'll be able to crowd out competitors. But we have larger questions to talk to each other about and talk with ourselves about as it relates to how much do we really want to share with these people.
Yeah, and just assume they've seen it all.
Yeah.
And they've read it all. I just assume you're reading all my emails and listening to all my phone calls with Chris Darwalt. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, conservative court watchers say President Trump's already making his mark on the federal court system, and now he's got a chance to begin reshaping what is widely viewed as the most liberal federal appeals court in the country. Trace Gallagher is tracking it. He joins us live from the heart of the Ninth Circuit, which may be in for big change. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. The Ninth Circuit is the nation's largest court of appeals, covering 9 western states. And in recent years, the court has handled some of the nation's most pivotal issues like immigration, same-sex marriage, and landmark environmental cases. The court, as you noted, has also gained a reputation as being among the nation's most liberal, and advocates have fought to keep it that way. In fact, 4 years ago, when Circuit Judge Stephen Reinhart, a liberal stalwart, was 83, his longtime friend and dean of UC Berkeley School of Law, Erwin Chemerinsky, suggested that Judge Reinhart step down, while Democrats still had the power to replace him with a like-minded liberal. Reinhart refused, and now his death allows President Trump to name his replacement. And it goes even deeper. Of the 29 judges who make up the Ninth Circuit, there are now 8 vacancies. And with Republicans controlling the Senate, Mr. Trump likely has the power to dramatically change the Ninth Circuit, which has been a thorn in his side. Remember, the Ninth Circuit ruled against Trump's travel ban and his plan to withhold federal funding from sanctuary cities. Trump's nomination still wouldn't turn the court conservative, but it would certainly tilt it that way. Though we should note, California Senator Dianne Feinstein, the senior Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, has vowed to fight Trump's nominees. On the flip side, Republican members of the Senate Judiciary are already annoyed with Democrats for slow-walking judicial nominees, and now they are vowing to change the rules to speed up the process.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. While his critics have long claimed he wants to fire special counsel Robert Mueller, the president's legal team says that is not the case, and he even got asked tonight. Next, we're going to let the panel decide what this means from the president today. And former Attorney General Loretta Lynch breaking her silence on that infamous tarmac meeting. What she's saying about that, James Comey, and much more next. This is the Fox News Alert. Is China blinking first on trade? We are just getting this in from a conference in Shanghai where China's President Xi Jinping is promising to lower tariffs on products including cars. Now, the speech is being reported as an effort to strike a conciliatory tone amid rising trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Stock futures already like it, soaring. The Dow up, for example, 252 points at this hour. The futures there. Well, revisiting our top story tonight, the president responding to FBI agents raiding the office, home, and hotel room of his personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Mr. Trump calling the raid a disgrace and calling Mueller's investigation an attack on our country. Let's bring in tonight's panel for reaction. Philippe Reines, former senior advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Charlie Hurt, Fox News contributor and opinion editor for the Washington Times. And Sagar Enjeti, the White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Quick roundup down the line. What do you make of what we're hearing out of China tonight? Then we'll get to the main topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting, given that, just days ago, the Chinese were saying that there was absolutely no room for negotiations, that these tariffs were going to go into place, and that there was no channels of communication between the White House and the Chinese. Now, just a couple days later, President Xi seems to be backing down on this, so you're going to see Larry Kudlow and the president very, very happy tomorrow.
Maybe happy dance tomorrow, Charlie.
Yeah. We've been losing the trade battle with China for a very, very long time, and politicians in both parties have kind of done the same thing, which is really basically nothing. So, maybe trying something different and hoping for a different result maybe works.
Philippe, the White House could use some good news tonight.
They sure can if they
I think that's it. Okay.
Well, anything that would make the markets move in a positive territory, it seems like for the
Sure.
president that would be a positive thing. Okay, so let's get to the story at hand, these raids on Michael Cohen today. Now, our understanding is that this came from the special counsel. He then, according to the statutory framework, as I understand it, he would have had to talk to Rod Rosenstein, who is overseeing this thing. They referred it to the local U.S. Attorney's office there, and then the raids. So this is what Cohen's lawyer is saying tonight. In part, it was completely inappropriate and unnecessary. It resulted in the unnecessary seizure of protected attorney-client communications between a lawyer and his clients. Philippe, that's being described as a pretty extraordinary step.
I think everyone has described an extraordinary step, including the people who took it. And that's why there are such important safeguards before taking it. I think we should attach names here. What Mueller seems to have done is that he took it to a man named Jeffrey Berman, who is now the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And he was chosen by Donald Trump, period. Let's not get into any kind of fancy who he is. He is in that job because of Donald Trump. He said, go do it. So whatever there is, and we'll find out eventually whatever it is or whatever it isn't, he deemed it proper. He deemed it necessary. So with all due respect to Mr. Cohen's attorney, when Mr. Cohen is an attorney to an attorney, there's something there. And I know that that's not what everyone wants to hear. But I think everyone should be patient and trust our law enforcement agencies to let them work the process.
There are several steps of vetting that this has to go through, numerous within the DOJ, the U.S. Attorney's Office there as well in New York. And they would have to know, Charlie, that if we eventually see the search warrants or get more about that, it's going to be the most dissected search warrant of all time. Just behind the FISA applications if we ever get those. So they had to, as Philippe said, everything had to be in a row for them to pull this off.
Absolutely, and you know, like Philippe says, we don't know what is in there yet, and as you say, it will be closely inspected. But it does underscore the sort of the degree to which the DOJ has lost a lot of credibility over the past year pursuing what was pretty much a farce of an investigation, and very much weaponizing these investigative tools, even going back, I would argue, before the election, but weaponizing these investigative tools for political purposes. And they've done enormous amounts of damage to themselves by doing that. And you know, the Russia collusion, they've not produced any. There's never been any real evidence that there's Russian collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia.
And that's what we've heard from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we continue to hear. Now, tonight.
Well, that's not exactly fair.
Well, I want to make sure we get Sagar in here, too. So I want to get to this point.
As long as Sagar says that.
Something tells me you might not say the exact same thing you would say.
Exactly the same.
Okay, so Bill Mitchell, a conservative radio host, tweeted this out. People are saying, oh, no, this thing with Mueller and Trump's attorneys is bad. I'm doing the phonetics. There's a lot of A's in there. Why? Trump is innocent. All Mueller will find out is that Trump is innocent. That's the whole point. And Sagar, I mean, the president continues to say tonight, I got nothing to worry about. I'm innocent of collusion.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, this is what the president, and this is what Sarah Huckabee Sanders told us a couple months ago, that when the president says witch hunt, what he means there is this consistent, you know, fawning out of the investigation. You see now that they're going into Michael Cohen's bank records that go back several years, far beyond the campaign. Now you see this story breaking tonight about, you know, a Ukrainian steel magnate's donations to the Trump Foundation. These are all things that are outside of the purview of the original purpose of the council in their view. And they consistently view this as a sprawling out investigation that's going to, you know, continue to exist for the remainder of their presidency. You know, we heard from the White House special counsel, or from the White House counsel, Ty Cobb, this was going to be wrapped up by Thanksgiving, then it was going to be wrapped up by Christmas. I mean, this thing has absolutely no end in sight, and you saw on full display what damage this is doing to the president. You know, he was so angry, and I think that it's quite in reaction to the fact that his, you know, his personal attorneys has just been raided in a matter that, by all accounts, has absolutely nothing to do with Russia and Russian collusion.
All right, we gotta, oh no, Philippe, we'll discuss during commercial. Okay, we gotta leave it there for now, but don't go anywhere because we've got more hot topics for you. It is he said, she said, former FBI Director James Comey at odds with his ex-boss, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, over Hillary Clinton's emails. Philippe's gonna want to talk about that and what happened at that tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton. Brand new details with our panel next. Comey said it gave him a queasy feeling. That's how he described it when his former boss, President Obama's Attorney General Loretta Lynch, he says, asked him to downplay the Hillary Clinton email investigation. It was Lynch's tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton that ultimately led Comey to go public with news of the probe.
That I had to do something separately to protect
the credibility of the investigation, which meant both the FBI and the Justice Department.
Were there other things that contributed to that you can describe in an open session?
Probably the only other consideration that I guess I can talk about in an open setting is that at one point the Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter, which confused me and concerned me.
Now in a new interview ahead of Comey's book release, Lynch is telling her version of the story.
To the extent, though, that he noted it, that it bothered him, did he go to you and question your credibility with regard to the Clinton case?
We had a full and open discussion about it.
He didn't raise any concerns about it?
And concerns were not raised.
All right, let's bring back tonight's panel. Philippe, Charlie, and Sagar, thanks for sticking around, not running out during the commercial. All right, Charlie, I'll start with you. What do you make of this? Because that Comey book is coming out. He's got a lot to say. Do you think that has anything to do with her decision to talk now?
Oh, I think that that has everything to do with it, and I think that she'll probably try to get all of these interviews out of the way now, and then probably go dark after the book comes out. But it'll be interesting because obviously Comey has spent a lot of time and put a lot of effort into this book. It's going to be very well read by both supporters and detractors. But I would imagine that there will be an enormous amount of material found in the book that both sides will use to their advantage. But it's going to be high spec for discrepancies like this, and I don't see how it's possible that you could get out a book like this without finding lots more discrepancies.
Okay, so Lynch also had to say this in talking with NBC. She said she finds it troubling when people question the motivations of dedicated, committed professionals. I look at the department as a place that I was proud to lead. So watching the attacks on it is painful at times. I mean, Sagar, something else we're waiting for right now is the Inspector General's report on how the DOJ handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you saw just recently that the Attorney General did appoint a new U.S. attorney in order to oversee the handling of that email investigation and handling over some of those thousands and thousands of emails regarding the investigation to Congress. But Congress is absolutely still not happy about this because, you know, if you see Trey Gowdy and some of the other members have said, they said this is absolutely inefficient. You know, you are still seeing a total slow rolling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation from the FBI and the DOJ, and they suspect that they simply just don't want Congress to find out how the entire investigation was handled.
Yeah, and they've said, let me read a little bit of what Gowdy had to say today. He says about this idea of appointing this U.S. attorney to help them get the documents along to Congress. He says, I struggle to understand what has been happening over the previous months since Congress was assured DOJ and FBI were working on the document request. Congress requested these documents months ago. Congress has consistently been assured the production was in progress. Philippe.
Well, again, I think it's important to use names in this case. This is a Republican member of Congress complaining in a vacuum when in reality it is Jeff Sessions. It is the President's Attorney General. It is the President's FBI Director, Chris Wray, who decided to put this person in charge. So this notion that there's any kind of resistance, I don't know if there isn't, but they should look in the mirror because they're running the place. In terms of Comey, you know, I think probably there's more common ground on this panel than not when it comes to Jim Comey. He is about to be exactly where he wants to be. He's about to be victim, hero, showboater, best-selling author, woe is me, look how hard it is to be right all the time, I am so sanctimonious. It is draining to be this righteous.
You have a lot of empathy tonight.
I do.
I
think we both came down with something. I think it's bringing up different attributes.
So what do you make tonight, too? The president talking about Jeff Sessions, again, very heated again tonight, saying, like, if he would have told us he was going to recuse Charlie, I would have picked someone else.
Yeah, no, he's
still mad.
He's a dog. He's a dog with a bone. He gets on that little thing that bothers him, and he doesn't let it go.
All right.
And it's what's great about him. And
oh boy. Okay. On that note, thank you, panel. First, coming up in the news next.